Welcome to Psychologist Talks. This is going to be the first episode in the series titled A Journey into Self-Destruction. This builds on an episode, one of the first episodes I shot. I believe it was called Self-Destruction and the Lurches of Society. I will have a link in the description if you're curious about that. But I also have a list of disclaimers here that I'm going to be going into because this episode is all about politics. And so I think disclaimers are going to be necessary. Now, I did shoot an introductory episode saying like, hey, what's this going to be about? You can go listen to it, watch it if you want. It's about 8 minutes long, I think. So a couple of those disclaimers are going to be similar here, but there's going to be some unique disclaimers given the nature and topic of this particular episode, because here we go, dicey, right? And when things get dicey, people kind of go into their camps real quick. Please stick with me, folks. So number one is, hey, I'm doing this not as like a reactionary episode. I think rightfully people are a little bit suspicious that when something bad happens, then people go and start making excuses and they start weaving the web of rationale after the fact, which makes some sense when we talk about like learning. Well, something new, there's new information, so we have to adjust our theories and hypotheses, but quite importantly, I ain't adjusting nothing because I have already been talking about this. Now, I've been talking about this for several years, and note that in that episode, I telescope way out and say, not only is it not, well, I don't say this explicitly, but not only is it not just about politics today, this is a human nature thing. This is something that has been happening for decades, and by the way, has happened historically time and time again since the dawn of our creation. We go through these self-destructive lurches. So if you think that I'm just making this as an argument of convenience, au contraire, I believe this firmly. This is something that we do and fall into frequently. I just, sadly, believe we're in the active throes of it, and the election epitomizes it. It is the culmination of a long period of self-destruction that we've been going through for, I would estimate, about 20, 30 years now. Number two, kind of case in point, is that I'm taking this from a psychological point of view. I mean, my entire channel is devoted to this. But I also want to be a little bit more upfront and say, do understand that I appreciate that I know, very surprising, I'm a human being, and because of that, I am subject to my own biases and my own beliefs. Our field, by the way, if you're unfamiliar with us, teaches us this, that we have to know our own stuff unduly well to try to be as objective as we humanly can with the people who come to see us for help, because we cannot be the same as everyone. We have to be a jack of all trades and a jack of all perspectives. And in doing so, we tend to be quite good at objectivity. Well, I shouldn't say we collectively. A good portion of us tend to be quite good at that. That doesn't mean that we're totally absent our personal beliefs. They color what we do. But again, we try to manage them. Now, I'm a firm believer. I don't suppress them. I make sure that I infuse them. And so I will, full disclaimer, have I voted Democrat for a while? Yeah, I have. But if you were to ask me, why do I vote Democrat? It's because, full circle, because of the psychology. I live in the human service profession, and because of that, I tend to want to help people and understand that we are strongest so long as we are helping those that are in need. That is what makes societies great, and so I tend to vote with the party that tends to support those things, and I can guarantee you there's one party that does a far better job of that than another by history, recent history. Number two, the whole essence of this episode, I believe the underlying psychology of society is being jeopardized. And you better damn well believe I'm going to vote for the party that protects that better than the other. Or heaven forbid, if I lived in a country that had more than two viable parties, I'd vote for whatever party was supporting that. Because that is very key and critical right now. Disclaimer number three is that please note that I appreciate that what I'm speaking to, this self-destructive lurch, is representative of a process, not a destination, not a known outcome. I will die on this hill that we have been engaging in a very significant self-destructive lurch, and the election and the results of this election edify that. You will not convince me otherwise. But what I can be convinced of is that, oh heaven, I don't know what the for sure outcome is. So if you perhaps are a Trump supporter or more conservative leaning, going, oh, here we go, someone who's just kind of, sounding the alarms and all this other stuff, like, I am, but I'm not pretending to know that, his 4 years, I hope, is going to be absolute destruction. I don't know that. Could it be? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Because the self-destructive lurches have been going on so long, might it be a final nail in the coffin? It is possible that there are enough institutions and things falling and compromised, and we'll get to this metaphor later, that the tree will die. The roots have become so corrupted and rotted that the tree is gone. But it's very possible we will just continue to rot or corrupt more roots, but the tree is still technically alive. So do note, I am appreciating that. I'm just not going to budge that we're engaging in self-destruction, and this is just one. Remember, I have multiple episodes of many things that are pushing us towards a self-destructive lurch. Politics just edifies this, and that's what we're talking about today. My final comment is a plea if you happen to be a conservative viewer or listener. Do note I say conservative broadly because I understand people might be viewing in another country. They might not be in the Republican United States Party. And so, conservative-leaning folks, they tend to be kind of like, I don't know, there tends to be this kind of more lurch towards, strong people, self-protectionism, which is another episode, the economy matters at all costs. Let's kind of tighten things up. And so, I want you to kind of stay and listen and entertain what I'm saying, because I'm going to make an argument that you might not inherently agree with. There are other forces at play that are actually more important than what you are voting for. And that's if you telescope in our particular election, what we are voting for is already dangerous. There's a huge swath that is dangerous, and there's a portion that is just foolish. Sensible logically on paper, but I argue foolish at the end. So let's get into what we're talking about here. So, essentially, I'm going to go through Trump. Sorry, gotta make comments on him. Number 2, the people and institutions around him. Number 3, a dissolution of common truths. And number 4, what I'm already alluding to, is what exactly were we voting for if we were electing Trump? If any of the other stuff I'm about to say holds any semblance of truth, then we've got to be voting for something. Well, I've got a theory on that. Now, do note, as I go through all of these, I'm going to try to speak into the good or positive or sensible first. I think that's really important. We don't do enough of that as a society anymore. We're so busy attacking what is not legitimate that we forget the important notion of acknowledging the things that are sensible. And so I'm going to do that. And I hope that is helpful and appreciated. So let's jump into this, assuming anybody sticks around for more than 3 minutes, since apparently nobody can handle anything more than 3 to 5 minutes anymore. My view time tends to suggest that. But by golly, this needs time. I can't run through this in a freaking TikTok clip, folks. I actually got to dig a little bit deeper, so let's get digging. Number 1 is Donald Trump. Now let me start with the positive. Now the positive is not about Trump. I have nothing positive to say about Trump. I do not. After observing this dude for 9 years, anything positive is just like something I could say about any human being. It's inconsequential. But Trump, the president, Trump, the person who is trying to access positions of power and have influence over my and other people's lives, I have very little positive to say. What I do have positive to say is the notion of how he was elected in 2016. The Republicans did something, it might be too gracious to say brave, but something very difficult and admirable in the sense of electing someone who is more of an outsider and, if I'm being generous with what the interpretation was, a disruptor. I have long believed, and I still believe to this day in businesses and everywhere alike, that it's important to have disruptors, particularly if something gets very stale or stagnant. You need an intentional disruptor that goes in and operates in a particular way that jives with the current state of thing, but is readily saying, why are we doing that? Maybe we should do it some other way. And to change, the RNC, I mean, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party has had a hell of a time trying to get a different type of leader to be elected a president. Well, let me reverse that. I don't think they try very hard. I think the populace often is poking at them going we want somebody different, and they actually resist. And so I thought it was just kind of a wild thing that they were actually able to achieve it. And that's where my positive sentiments end, because who was selected was Donald J. Trump. Now, there's no way for us to have known for sure, how those 4 years were going to go. But I can tell you, if it's of any, solace, that it's not just a bunch of alarmists. The majority of people in the mental health field that I talked to were concerned about this guy, and they were concerned about him before he even won. You talked about opinions on what do you make of this dude? It's like, ooh, that is not a healthy guy. And I think this is where people were discrediting him and laughing about him. I was not laughing. I was concerned. Even though I was earlier in the field then, someone who really is inclined towards personality and has really gotten in depth with personality, it's just that's not good. And as he got more and more, I'm like, why are they putting the eggs in that basket? A disruptor, yes, but he is a destroyer. He is a destroyer. What are you doing? Now, why is this the case? Let me double check my notes here. I'll give you some reasons because, again, I'm not just saying things to say things. I'm trying to give you some rationale. But I will say this, we're in a little bit of say what we want, right? And just be bold and don't be soft about things. If you're sitting there going what does this schmuck know about anything? I don't even care to hear his reasons. Well, I'll bargain this. Think about my field and what I do. I'm very well researched in personality. A lot of my work is around that. I assess people deeply, richly into people's psyches for a living. And I've met hundreds, if not, I might be eclipsing 1,000 people in my profession, in my time in this profession. Directly or indirectly, but a good amount of those, a good portion of those, very deeply knowing somebody. How many people have you deeply known in your life? What variety of people have you seen? Well, if you're a fellow mental health professional, you might be high-fiving me going heck yeah, I've seen a ton of people. But if I may be so bold just to assert, since we're allowed to do that these days, I can assert with no evidence whatsoever. But maybe I know more about people than, 95% of anybody who will view this. Perhaps I might be a good judge of character, because guess what? At least 50% of the populace is not a terrible good judge of character. And I don't mean that exclusively to Trump. I just mean people in general ain't very good judges. And that's not because they're incapable. Some very much get duped very easily, very gullible people. But others just need more time. But that's the kicker. We've had the time with Trump. So maybe you might want to believe me because I've met a lot of people. And I've met people like him. Now, I can't diagnose. I might conveniently have a link down in the description that might be of interest to people. I can't diagnose, but I can absolutely speculate on how he operates because we see him for 9 years. 9 years constantly in the public eye. I can assert something. And guess what I'm going to assert? He ain't healthy. He ain't healthy. Why? Well, number one is governing principles. Anytime you're observing a leader, you tend to, either directly because heaven forbid they're a good leader and they actually kind of talk about their governing principles. You get a sense of the human being, but because of what they say, but also just because of how they behave and how they operate. And over time, it was the initial concern that panned out all the way through and continues to this very day. His governing principle is himself, his ego. Everything revolves around his ego. And you might say well, aren't we all egotistical to a certain degree? It's no. We tend to make decisions with more information than our ego. We do. And I'm not saying that he will always make decisions only on his ego, but our ego is charged a lot of the time. Anytime there's conflict, anytime there's disagreement, anytime there's a possibility that we might be judged or people might like or dislike what we do, sounds a lot like the office of the presidency that is constantly subjected to this kind of stuff, isn't it? Yeah. The minute those sorts of things are in play, no matter what intellect you have, no matter what knowledge you have, it immediately has to compete with the psychology. And this guy has proven time and time again that he is extremely easily rattled by the psychology. And so what you get is an at best 33% hit ratio for this dude for acting on anything reasonable. When he's got ultimate power and he controls all the offices, the House, the Senate, et cetera, maybe he'll make more decent, intellectually informed choices because he's not fighting as much, which, by the way, you should have to do in government because people have different opinions in the world and different needs in the world. But maybe that will incline him somewhat. But the office of the presidency is constantly under scrutiny. And so there is a high likelihood that he will falter. that he will falter to his psychology, and he will be acting more on psychology than actual rational decision making. This is Psychology 101. We are all subject to it. If you've ever tried to make really difficult decisions when you're anxious, are you at your best? No. And what I'm telling you, this guy is compromised psychologically all the time, because the minute anything challenges his ego, his guiding principle being himself, he is compromised. Even possibly worse, it's not just conflict and bad things. It's the fact that you can play into his ego and feed his ego, and he will act based on that too. That by being valued and being liked and being esteemed, you can also get what you want. Number two is he, as a leader, let's say he's the biggest asshole ever. I hear Republicans say this all the time. Yeah, he's an asshole, but, and it's like, the dude also selects people that are like him and agree with him. A good leader who even is an asshole will at least select people around them that have areas of expertise that they do not, and those that actually counterbalance and challenge them in a meaningful way. And Trump does not do that. He selects people that gratify him and echo what he believes. Now, if you're still holding out, if you're a Republican listening and going, yeah, but there's people who can safeguard. The president doesn't have ultimate power. Even if he doesn't select great people, somebody will be a guardrail for him. Have we not listened to the people who tried to do this and barely made it through the first time? Have we not seen how frequently, when he learns that you're trying to steer him away from what he wants, that he will axe you immediately? If you go to the business world and look just at leaders in general, far lower stakes than the office of the presidency, and you talk to underlings who try to steer unhealthy leaders, ask them how that goes. Ask them how effective are they truly. Now, because they have their own savior complex, they will try to convince you yeah, I did a pretty good job. But what typically happens objectively, you go talk to IO psychologists, industrial organizational psychologists who observe this stuff, they will not paint a super optimistic picture about what the outcomes of that process are. Because there is just salted, burned, napalmed earth next to whatever victories these kind of underlings are trying to steer a really unhealthy leader away from. And so even if you are going all the way down the totem pole and saying, well, maybe that'll protect it, you are still getting at best, a 33% hit rate. At best. It is so dangerous. He is selecting it's not really a joke anymore. The Republican elites, the people who are in power, operate on projection. They constantly talk about draining the swamp. They are creating their own version of the swamp. That's a guarantee. This endless relativism, this worshipping of oneself, one's personal economy, one's personal worth above all else is incredibly dangerous in a leader. That leader will have a corrupting effect around them. And at the end of the day, if you go, okay, so what? Why is any of that all so dangerous? I'm just over here living my life. It doesn't have any bearing on me. Oh, just wait. Because what this endless relativity does, and we're getting towards a dissolution of a common truth too, is it destroys what we know and what we understand to be normal, how things typically operate. It's kind of this kind of very grayed out area that kind of at least gives us a general circle of how things operate. And with endless relativity, endless kind of the randomness of how he operates, because again, just at the whim of whatever the ego says in that moment, that circle kind of dissolves and then nothing's left. We can't really put our hands on anything. And this is why you see people believing all sorts of things, and there's just stark differences of opinion because there's endless relativity. There's no governing principle, again, except him and what he says. And we'll project meaning onto him all the time. Well, maybe he meant this. I'm sure he meant this. That means that there is no truth. There's no truth anymore. It's just whatever we want to make of it. And you know what that does? It is the most fertile soil for corruption you can find. The most fertile soil. Because corruption thrives on just chaos and disorganization, and that there is no common governing truth. Because then they can just come in like a wolf in a sheep's clothing and just sneak in and say Well, here's this problem, and I believe it to be this problem. I'm going to offer you this solution. They are the snake oil salesmen. And there's no protections anymore. There's no castle walls. There's no like common belief of what is a wolf. And so they are just waiting to come in. When I talk about Trump, one of the things I rail against the criticisms is that people on both sides see him to be some sort of mastermind. I go, no, he's not. He's not. I can tell you the masterminds, the real dangerous ones, like the Putins of the world are the very, very dangerous ones. Because not only are they unhealthy, they are intentional in funneling that lack of health. They're manipulative. They're incredibly dangerous because they are so precise. Trump is hapless. That's my only real compassion for this guy is he's just so unhealthy, and his governing principle is so surrounding his ego. He creates corruption by accident. This type of unhealthy individual tends to just like do authoritarian things just by virtue of their lack of health. He is not maliciously, planfully, making sure these things are going to happen. He is not an intentional dictator. He does dictator-like things because of his pathology. And you'd be like, oh, good. That means we don't need to worry about it, right? Like, nah, you do. That actually makes it even more dangerous because, he is just creating fertile soil for the actual wolves, and we can't tell they're a wolf until they're already too late. So we do need to be concerned. So, I don't know if it was Putin or somebody who said it. He's a useful idiot. Sorry, he's a useful idiot. He's so unhealthy. He's useful to bad things, for bad things. So let me double check here. Yeah. So, I've already been talking about it. That's kind of point one, the office of the presidency and kind of the people around that office. And then there's a delegitimization of institutions, this kind of vicarious effect, particularly as unhealthy leaders select typically unhealthy people along with them. And it has both a corrupting effect in the sense of like institutions that even the president might not be terribly invested in. I mean, they should be invested in everything, but, they have their particular areas of interest. But, they might not be as sciencey. They might not be as economically inclined. They might not be as foreign relation inclined, whatever it might be. I mean, energy, right? Like, they're not so inclined. And so they need experts in these offices. But a double whammy is happening. One, Trump has a tendency, once again, to elect people based on who gratifies him and gets his needs met, or goes with whatever the beliefs of his voting bloc are. He doesn't care. He's proven this time and time again. Or the other wild thing is he will delegitimize the institutions. He will claim corruption with no evidence. And you can scream at me till you're blue in the face that he has evidence, but it is a obvious tell with any leader when you sit them down and keep saying, describe to me, explain to me what's going on. What is your rationale? Why is that? And they don't do it. That means they don't know. Or they're obscuring something dangerous because they're trying to corrupt the system and they don't want you to know that they have a sneaky bad reason for doing what they're doing. But again, he's so hapless that I don't think that's the case. He literally doesn't know. But he just delegitimizes it anyway. And so now you have a populace that doesn't believe in experts and they don't believe in institutions. So not only is he burning the office of the presidency and he's burning the sort of political system, the federal government, by proxy in who he selects and who is attracted to him, he is also burning down institutions, the greater kind of collective whole that either helps the public or actually acts as a check and balance for him, which he hates the most. Those are the things he guns for the most. You have a collective burning down of the entire forest of politics. Not a controlled burn. There's a sense, I mean, I will be the first to admit, like, are the governing agencies, are they wonderful unequivocally? Are they super efficient? Probably not. There's got to be room for improvement in several. I am sure. But you do not get to a position of health by destroying the whole thing. And as a businessman, quote unquote, he should know that you cannot destroy a company and restart unless it is truly a lost cause. So are we saying America's a lost cause? So he's burning it all down. And you, by voting for him, by electing him, we are voting to burn this stuff down. Not a controlled burn, not like we're gonna, burn this down and we know a forest will come back. We're burning it to burn it. And I know Republicans will be like, no, there's a rhyme and a reason. Again, I'm getting to one of the reasons. Like, no, it'll like, nah, sorry, y'all. Like when we talk about, like what these institutions are going to look like, there's no game plan here. The game plan seems to be building an ugly polluting factory instead of a forest. Instead. Do I know that for a fact? No, I don't. But the signs point to that, particularly when you look at the election of RFK. Or not the election, but this idea that he's going to put RFK into an office. Why did he do that? Not because he cares about healthcare, but because RFK brought with him votes. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Ta-da! And then he comes in after the fact, right, and tries to convince you that he has all these reasons, and people reject onto him and say, like, I'm sure he's doing it because of this reason. Nah, he did it because of power. He did it because his guiding principle is himself. And so the structure burns. And now we reach the final point of like, okay, all these structural kind of variables around the political system are burning. Let's say that's true. Let's say I believe you, Dr. Berry, that's true. Okay. So what? Right? Like, we'll survive. We've survived worse than this. And I go, well, wait a second. There's one more. There's one more. And these are the common truths. Common truths in my book are these founding principles, these kind of the moral fiber of a society. This is the stuff that created America to begin with. Is that there were these central notions that we just could not ignore, and we could not realize or get solved living over in Britain, in England, whatever you want. And so we left. And we fought a war to preserve these common truths. Now, these common truths have not been perfectly stable over time. They have to evolve, right? Like, what is equality has had to evolve. But what's fascinating about the common truths is if you track the history of this country, which is still in its infancy, it's a very young country, they haven't evolved much. They haven't. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing. Because it's a guiding principle. It's a guiding light. It's something that keeps us honest with ourselves. And we always, these guiding principles, these common truths aren't suffocatingly narrow. There's wiggle room in there. But we have them for a reason, because when they reach the boundaries of what seems to be allowable, we begin to stop and go, wait. This doesn't feel right. There's something off here. But we've been dissolving those. And one of the primary bringers of that dissolution has been, I'm sorry, the Republican Party, particularly the embracing of Donald Trump and the MAGA movement. Now, again, I know, I'm sure I'm already at dislikes. I mean, heck, people put dislikes just because of the title, I am sure. But again, I hope you bear with me here and just listen. Again, this is not a political argument. This is a psychological argument. So there's more than two, let me be clear, but I'm going to select two of the major ones. Number one, telling the truth. This is audio only. I just made a face. And number two is respect. So let's start with a very obvious one. I don't know, telling the truth. This is, I would argue, kind of a universal common truth for, I don't know, most societies. And it's not that there aren't white lies, right? Like, I would be a fool to sit here and look you in the face, or, audio, and say, like, politicians have always been righteous until Trump. Like, no, they haven't. Like, come on. You and I both know there's been white lies, and you get them in the corner, and they just refuse to take responsibility. It's annoying as hell. Again, there was rhyme and a reason to look for disruption in this, but instead we elected a liar. Sorry, he's a liar. I mean, there's so many examples of this. And even if you were to say, well, that's all fake news media, they're so frequent. Statistically, some of them are true, which means he is a liar. You can go back to all sorts of presidents of both parties. They're not inherently prone to lying. But we have elected someone who commonly lies and obscures and bends things to be so close to a lie that you begin to forget what the truth is. And what's wild is Trump himself, again, he is so unhealthy. He is bound to do this because his governing principle is himself. And if something jeopardizes him, like, say, being told he's a liar, guess what he's going to do? He's going to double down and say, "Nuh-uh, it's the truth." And so then the electorate and the media is left to say, what do we do with this? Well, also fellow politicians, people in the same party, what do we do with this? And you know what they did? I've already alluded to it. Or in fact, I think I said it directly. They meaning make for him on his behalf. They say this is what he actually meant. That's not what he really was going to say. And then they go back behind and coach him, like, say these other things. And half the time he doesn't even do it. He's just like, no, I'm not going to say that. So, this is why I blame the party. They were the first ones to say, you know what? Moving away from the truth is fine. Power and retaining power is more important than holding to the truth. And increasingly, we've gotten to the point where it doesn't matter anymore. We can say whatever we want. Alternative facts. You look at historians, you look at people who have written about one of the greatest pillars in stopping evil in the world. It is the ability to differentiate between fact and fiction. Fiction, if it enunciate. To be able to hold people accountable for lying. That people have to tell the truth, and we need to come and surround and say, this is going to be the truth, right? Are we all in agreement that this seems to be the truth? The minute that dissolves, we are severely compromised. And the Republican Party and a huge swath, not a massive swath, because tons of people just don't vote here, said, like, lying is okay. 9 years of tracking this. This is not suspecting him to be a liar. He is a proven liar. And we say other things are more important than the fact that this guy regularly lies and obscures. That is one of the most dangerous things to do. You cannot and should not trust a liar. You do not invite a liar into your home to take care of your family, to take care of your finances. You do not do that. Nobody would do that. But for whatever reason, we think it's fine. A liar in the presidency will not matter. It will be okay. And that's on top of everything else. That's on top of his lack of health in other spheres, that his ego matters more than anything, and on top of that, he lies. This is a massively important point. It is one of the most glaring, obvious pieces of evidence that this represents a self-destructive lurch. We have just absolutely kicked out one of the primary pillars, not just in politics, but in humanity in general. The truth does not matter. The truth is relative. Number 2 is respect. At the end of the day, if we are unsure if someone is a liar or not, guess what we turn to after that? Whether or not they treat other people with dignity and respect. Now, this is a hard thing to do. You can't make everybody happy. I'm a big, frank talker. I don't think if you're frank and direct, that makes you disrespectful. Is there a higher likelihood you can become disrespectful if you talk frankly and transparently? Yes. Is there a skill set to being frank and transparent without just being an asshole? Yeah, there is. But we've apparently just confused these two and say, I like this frank and direct guy, even though he is massively disrespectful. And most importantly, he is extremely disrespectful and angry and vindictive when people don't like him or say bad things about him. One of the truest tests of character and the ability to respect is not whether or not you respect people you like and people who are in your corner, but those who you do not like and those who say bad things about you or challenge you. This does not mean you just roll over and accept and say, well, I'll just, not get upset at all, or I'm not going to I'm not going to defend my position. But you do not, in a democracy, you do not fundamentally disrespect that person, if not then disregard them and retaliate against them. This is Leadership 101. Any healthy system hinges upon the ability for a leader to contain that. I mean, act strong, speak softly, carry a big stick. Sometimes you got to use the stick, but this dude operates only using the stick. He just swats at literally anything that gives him any grief whatsoever. And so we have a double whammy. We have a triple whammy. We have a quad. I don't know how to frame it anymore. The dude, guiding principle is himself and his ego, easily manipulated, values and devalues others, disrespects others, lies. And then he surrounds people with him that do the same. He delegitimizes institutions in a way that basically shows massive disrespect to people who've worked their entire lives for a particular thing. He disrespects the systems that are supposed to keep him in check, the very foundation of democracy. It's all falling. It's all burning. This is why I believe the results of this election are so self-destructive. So self-destructive. We are destroying ourselves by letting this man go into the office of the presidency. It's right there in front of us. You would never elect this man to any company that you care about. Ever. You wouldn't. I know there are people who are watching, if assuming they even watch more than 2 seconds, saying like, yeah, I would. Yeah, I would. If you believe anything of what I said, you would not. If you believe in understanding what a healthy disruptive leader is, it is not him. It is not the MAGA movement. The MAGA movement is one of destruction, first and foremost. Might they rebuild something at some point? Maybe. But they do not have a game plan for what they are building towards. Their game plan is to bend things to their will so that they get what they want. And now we get to see what they do with that, and we'll see if I am correct. Now, once again, I don't know for sure how bad it will get. The tree is still generally intact, but it ain't healthy. The roots have been rotting. They are corrupted. And what I'm telling you is the roots are going to continue to rot and be corrupted. And the question is it too late and the tree will soon fall? Or is this a final lurch towards self-destruction that maybe we have a chance to stop and mitigate? I do not know. Now, we'll end with this. You might ask and say, all right, let's say I entertain all this stuff that you just told me, that this psychology is going on right now, that we are turning a blind eye to all of these essential principles that are leading us towards self-destruction. All right, let's say I buy that. Why the hell then did he win? If he's so bad, why did he win? Well, my general sense of things, and this is a sensible and common thing, we'll actually get into the episode on self-protection, is it is the almighty dollar. The almighty dollar is the fundamental primary reason why he won. What's wild to me is there's no guarantee that he actually does anything good for the dollar. And we conveniently pay attention to the stock market when it proves our point, and we don't pay attention to the stock market when it doesn't prove our point, ignoring and remembering the stock market is not what you and I are actually feeling in everyday life unless we have a lot of money in the stock market. But let's assume it's true. Let's assume that the Republicans, who have just ballooned deficits and really not done a whole heck of a lot business-wise, at best, we're kind of just sitting around in the gray zone with both these parties of which one's truly the most beneficial. But let's just assume this old and tired notion that Republicans are good for the economy is true and that Trump is an economic genius. Why would I still have a problem with electing a president based on money? Because it presumes that money is the fabric of society. It presumes that the economy is what keeps a society going and healthy. Now, let me start with the sensible first, because I frequently say in this episode I'm going to do that, right? Is the economy important? Oh, dreadfully important. Oh, yeah. I have no vested interest in the economy struggling. I do not want the economy struggle. It gets me very nervous, even if there are greater felt ills going on. Even I become quite nervous about it because, not only do I not want it for me, but there's implications for the nation's power and not governing, but leverage. There's a better word for that, but the ability to kind of leverage, even with enemies. Sanctions are an important thing, but that requires economic power. And so the economy does matter. But what is confused, I think, for most people is that the economy is not what created the society. The economy is a result of the society that was built before it, the culture of the coming together. America was not built on money. No great society was initially founded on money alone. It's usually formed on an idea, a set of morals, a set of principles on the underlying psychology. And the economy grows from that. And so the two are naturally intertwined. And so when the foundational kind of fabric, the psychology, the moral fibers, the common truths, the institutions are jeopardized, if you put all your eggs in the economic basket, there's no guarantee it will keep society up. Going back to this sort of net that keeps, the fabric that keeps a society up, it's a big portion, right? Like, I'm not saying if you're stitching up the economy fabric, that's not going to hold a good amount up, right? You know, like, really tough things can happen if the economy's doing well, for sure. But it's not all of it. It cannot by itself hold a society. And you go to businesses of like that constantly push off culture on and on and on and on. They're just like, but the money, we got to pay attention to the money. They eventually fail. Unless they just get lucky and the culture solves itself. And that's what we're going to have to see. Is there some sort of magical self-correction that's going to happen, that this lurch towards self-destruction is destructive, but it's not the final blow, right? The whole net is not going to collapse. So maybe if we stitch the economy, it will just barely hold us enough, even though people are falling and all sorts of things are falling on this other side. And then we're like, okay, now we can stitch the other things. Maybe. But more often than not, when this sort of, this underlying fabric has been compromised for a while, and remember what I said, 20, 30 years at least, we've been starting to cut at these other areas of fabric. We are playing a dangerous game by exalting money above all else. So I don't blame people for caring about the economy. I don't blame people for voting with that. But I'm making this episode to try to educate and say, be careful, assuming that is going to be the last bastion, the final stand, the thing that will keep us up, the final pillar that keeps the whole thing from collapsing, the big piece of fabric that we will not fall through, the final primary root that will keep the tree alive. Use whatever metaphor you want. What I'm telling you, be careful. It is not the primary. It sustains. It's a powerful one, but it is not everything. And we are playing with fire. This is a self-destructive lurch. Even if the economy does okay, it is a self-destructive lurch because of what we are giving up for the almighty dollar. So, I hope this has been a useful episode. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who are mostly questioning, like, why did this happen? Like, how did he win? And I hopefully provided explanation for that question of what I think is going on. But I'm asking the more important question, in my opinion, is what does this mean for society? What are the implications for this country? And the implications are something bigger than politics. Politics edifies it. The rise of Trump and the ongoing stay power of Trump edifies it. But there's a greater dilemma at hand, and that is, can we stop destroying ourselves, or do we have to fall all the way through the net before we realize that we have compromised too many things central to our operating? We shall see. Only time will tell. So, again, if you've stuck with me this long, kudos to you. I know this is a longer episode. But as always, I appreciate anybody listening, any curiosity that you extend my way. If you are a staunchly conservative or a Republican that has listened all the way, thank you. Thank you. In all seriousness, because I'm trying to tend to the psychology of our country, trying to tend to the psychology of people. That is my only goal. So I hope it's been helpful. I hope it has. And for the love, I say it at the end of every episode, but by golly, do I mean it in this episode. Stay curious. Thank you.